and welcome to another edition of the Sports Pro podcast. My name is Tom Bassam, but fortunately, you won't be hearing from me too much in this week's episode, as we're lucky enough to have a very special guest. His name is Matthew Porter. He is one of the key figures driving the game of darts right now, a sport which is definitely having a little bit of a moment. He's the chief executive of the PDC, the organisers of the World Darts Championship and many other of the biggest events in the sport. He sat down for a conversation with Sports Pro's features editor Sam Carp, where they discussed the future of the game, how to engage new fans, and also a little bit about a guy that everyone may have heard of, and that's Luke Littler. That's enough from me. Here's Sam and Matthew.
Matt Porter, Chief Executive of the Professional Darts Corporation. Welcome to the Sports Pro podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's loads for us to talk about. I'm sure our listeners will be really keen to get your insight on, the business of darts and where that business is going in the future. But I thought it'd just be nice to kind of start off with a little bit about you and I guess your journey in the sports industry and with the PDC as well. Because now you joined the PDC in 2008, I think I'm right in saying.
Yeah, I became chief exec in 2008. I've worked for Barry Hearn since 2001. But 2 days after I graduated from university, I started with him, essentially working as a press officer, as it was called back then, at Leyton Orient, when he owned Orient. And I worked there until 2014 when he sold the club. He made me chief exec there in 2006, which was a fantastic learning curve. I was only 26 and I was miles out of my depth. But there's only one thing to do when you're in an environment like that, and that's learn and learn quick. So that was great. And it was the club I grew up supporting as well. So it was a real labour of love. But alongside that, I'd been working on the darts, not in a daily role. Back then it was a lot different. There were a lot fewer events and there wasn't really all the associated stories that go with it that there are now. There wasn't social media and stuff like that. It was a little bit of website and a little bit of broadcast, and that was it. I did that until 2007 when the then chief executive left. So I've been chief executive of the PDC now for 15 years. A bit longer actually. Wow, it's 2024, isn't it? 17 years. Getting old. I couldn't combine the two roles today in the way that I did back then. The football club was a lot smaller infrastructure-wise, and the darts was 99% UK-based. So it was a lot different back then. And then when Barry sold Orient in 2014, I was exclusively on the darts with him from then. Actually, I'm back on the board at Orient. I worked with the now owners to buy it back from the person that Barry sold it to in 2017, but that's on the side, really. I'm not operational at Orient at all. I still love it, but my job is the darts. And I try and combine that with other areas at Matchroom where I can be of help. We're making a big push in 9-ball, and I've done some work in 9-ball, and I help the team there where I can. And same with the snooker and the boxing, because we've got a lot of commonalities, broadcasters, venues, sponsors, contractors. So, there is a lot of crossover, even though predominantly operationally I'm on the darts.
You mentioned there 17 years now. I think a lot has changed in that time within darts itself. It's become a lot more professional, I guess. The presentation of the events is a lot slicker, I imagine, than it was kind of back then. What's kind of the biggest difference from your perspective in that time?
When I first started working on the darts, there was still another organisation, the British Darts Organisation. The two World Championships kind of ran almost alongside each other, and the PDC was very much on a growth curve back then from a low base. It had rescued darts from the doldrums in the early to mid 90s and built it up to a decent level in the early 2000s. But it was only really when we started going international that we moved to the next level. And we started off Germany, Netherlands, Australia, America, bits and pieces in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. And it went from there because our broadcast presence grew. We were on TV in a lot of territories. And darts is a sport that, even if people haven't associated it on a professional level around the world, they're generally aware of it. A dartboard's quite a recognisable symbol, looks the same in every country. People can throw a dart. A 10-year-old boy can play against a 90-year-old woman. The barriers to entry are very limited. It's an accessible sport. It's an affordable sport. And it's a sport that's fun to play on any level, even if you're no good. How you look at places like Flight Club. Most people go Flight Club, can't hit the board, but they enjoy playing. We harnessed all of those different factors of darts and have been able to grow it quite prolifically over the last couple of decades. And it's been a fascinating journey to have been on. I think we're moving now into the next level, probably version 3 of the PDC, if you like. And I'm excited to see where it takes us.
There's quite a few parallels between the PDC and actually, if you look at the formation of Premier League in football, right, in the sense both formed in the early 90s by a group of, I guess, breakaway individuals in darts, obviously teams in football, because they felt basically the sport wasn't being commercialised enough. What is the business of the PDC and the business of darts look like
Yeah,
today?
well, I suppose, I mean, if you take that Premier League example, their growth as well has been down to the internationalisation of the products, both in terms of broadcast footprint and participants. And for the PDC, it's the same now. We know in the UK that our growth will be incremental. We almost sell out every ticket we have on sale in the UK anyway. Our sponsorship revenue is strong. Our broadcast profile is strong, but it's overseas where we can grow. We're mature now in markets such as DAC and Benelux, Australia. But can we grow in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia and Africa? Territories where, as I say, darts is known, but it's not professionalised. It's only known as a participation sport, not a professional sport. So for the PDC now, it's about increasing the global community of darts. How many different touch points can we give people in relation to not only the PDC, but darts generally? As I said before, people can play darts and enjoy darts without really knowing anything about the PDC. So we want to help move them further down the funnel and make them aware to throw 100 average and play against Michael van Gerwen, but you're going to be able to buy a ticket and come to the event when we come to your country. So it's for us, it's about turning darts into a truly global professional sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna come back to sort of some of those bigger picture questions in a bit, and growing the sport, especially on the back of some of the recent publicity that you guys have had. But I want to talk a little bit now about the World Darts Championship, even though the most recent edition was probably about 2 months ago now. We'll talk about that 2024 edition specifically in a second, but what is that event like to work on? You must be one of the few people whose jobs actually gets busier in the run up to Christmas, right?
Yeah, it does make me laugh when I get emails from people saying, hope you have a good break over Christmas. I think just do a little bit of research. Come on, just a little bit. But no, the World Darts Championship is an iconic event now. I think events become relatable with certain factors, and that helps their profile grow. And two of those factors are their location and their timing. So if I said to you the World Darts Championship, the first things you'd probably think of were Alexandra Palace and Christmas. And most people would be the same. In the same way they associate Wimbledon with the summer and the FA Cup final with May and Wembley. There's different things that they just grow. The profile of the event just grows organically because of certain factors. And people enjoy visiting Alexandra Palace, even though it can be a bit of a pain to get to. It's not the most accessible venue in the world, but it's iconic now. It's a famous venue. It was the People's Palace. It's been there 130 years or whatever, and entertained people from all walks of life throughout that time. And it does so superbly for the World Championship. It's a really atmospheric venue, and you look at we have a third of our ticket sales are to overseas fans, and for them it's a pilgrimage. They want to say they've been to Ali Pali. It's a bucket list event, it's an Instagram event. And then of course when you throw in the fact it's at Christmas, when everybody's in the mood to enjoy themselves, people are going out in groups, people are happy to come to London for a couple of days, do a bit of shopping, see a show, it's just a perfect storm. The event is so entertaining in its own right. And then when you add those other factors in, it's just unmatchable. We work with an agency called Two Circles, who do a lot of our insight, a lot of our data analysis. And they do what's called a net promoter score of events. And the World Darts Championship is consistently, year on year, the highest recorded score of any event across any sport, because it's so difficult to go there and not look forward to the build-up so much, because you've probably bought your ticket 4 months, 5 months before you go. You're planning what fancy dress you're wearing. You might be planning where you're meeting your friends in town, or are you going with colleagues after work. You've got to plan how you're going to get home because it's midnight, and the whole thing just builds the anticipation. And then you go, you have a great 4 hours worth of entertainment. You see some real exciting matches, even if it's players you've never heard of, doesn't matter, because it will still be entertaining. And even if one match happens to not be entertaining, there's another match along in a few minutes. Every box is ticked with it, and to work on it, I have to say, is such a buzz. I hope the way I'm talking about it, the enthusiasm's coming across, because I love every minute of that event, and there's no sort of prouder moment for me than when the walk-on's done for the final, and the final's underway and you're nearly there. That is like that's a great moment. That's a great moment, because you've just delivered 2.5 weeks of a fantastic sporting event.
Yeah, I can imagine. That point you made there about whether it doesn't always necessarily matter whether you have an amazing match or not, because I think also the fans in that venue, they're having a good time, even though that boards to them where they're sat, they can't see exactly where those darts are landing.
You could be sat in the front row in the middle and you can't see where the dart lands.
They're sort of still creating that atmosphere. There's enough going on to keep them entertained throughout those sort of 3-4 hours that are there for a session. And I think also from a you mentioned there sort of Christmas and the fact that it's at the Ali Pali, but I think also for the viewers at home, there's kind of that relatability now as well, in the sense that it occupies that really specific part of the sporting calendar. It's kind of, the sessions fit really nicely with all the festive football happening around that time of year. Like my dad, for example, will be planted on the sofa for about 12 hours.
But people get like that, don't they? Because most people, do have some downtime over that period, and they've got time with their family or friends or whatever over Christmas, and then they get fed up of that and they're like, I need something else now. So I'm going to sit on the sofa, I'm going to watch the darts because it's easy viewing, I can follow it, they're telling me the score, doesn't matter if I don't know who this player is, it is easy, it's watchable, it's relatable. You look at the players, you watch a Premier League football match, 99% of people look at it and know, I could never do that. You watch a darts match and there'll be a lot of people who think, do you know what, I could practice, I could do that. In reality, they've got no chance. The skill level of the players is way, way, way above what anyone else could muster. But you could have a go. That's the difference, and it makes it so relatable, and you just feel like you can reach out and touch it.
Yeah, and with because obviously the crowd plays such a big part in that, in terms of generating the atmosphere in the venue, but also at home, I think it just completely adds to the viewing experience at home, that you have, as soon as someone hits 180, the camera pans and you get that. It's kind of something you just expect to see now, and the whole the music, the out music and all that kind of stuff. And then you
recreate it, don't you? Because people got a dartboard for Christmas, so they put the dartboard on the wall, and you see the clip of the 86-year-old grandma from Belfast hitting the bullseye, and everyone's in her family singing Chase the Sun, and it brings people together. Whether you're in the venue or watching on TV at home, as you say, darts brings people together, and that's something that we're really conscious of and we really try and promote.
For sure. And the unique sort of side of that event experience, I guess one of the things that's come to be associated with it as well is things like fancy dress, for example, the sort of the fireworks inside. Is all of that by design and some of that by luck? Is it kind of...
The fancy dress question's a good one, and that's just by fluke. One day somebody decided to go to the darts in fancy dress, and it became a culture. It became a must-do thing. And now at Ali Pali, more so than any other event, Ali Pali's like 90% fancy dress. And we sell fancy dress on site. If you haven't turned up and you feel out of place, you can just go and buy some, because everybody's wearing it. And the smart ones actually take their civvies and get changed after, because you'll never get a cab. You've got no chance of getting a cab in fancy dress at 11:30. But no, look, joking apart, that has been a little bit of fortune and everything that's built up around that. But then the entertainment side of it, what we deliver in the Fans Village, and I should mention, I'm sure you'll mention them too, but Paddy Power, our sponsor, what they brought to the event this year, the activation, the engagement, the fun, the branding, they got everything just on point. They were so good at it. And we thought when we partnered with them, they would be a brand that would really understand the culture of darts. And they just got it straight away. They brought their own attributes to it as well. But it's the crowd that creates that atmosphere, and they don't really need a lot of G'ing up. They don't need a lot of cajoling, because they're there to enjoy themselves.
Yeah, a lot of them on their Christmas parties as well, I think, or
they
Christmas socials. Yeah, and just in terms of how quickly does that event sell out? I have mates and group chats who are sort of always saying, remember the darts tickets are on sale tomorrow.
We have 3 stages of sale. We have priority sale for our annual members. We have pre-sale for people who've signed up and given us their email address. And then we have general sale. This year, we had 8 accessible tickets left for general sale, with 0 standard tickets. The actual first day, the priority sale, that's a closed group of annual members. So you're not going to sell out on that day. But I think we got something like 200,000 email addresses signed up, additional to what we'd already had on our database for tickets for this year. So you're looking at 85 to 90,000 tickets, including hospitality, and they just fly. And that's July. So you've got to be on the ball, because no one who's thinking about Christmas in July. But if you're not, then it's tough.
Well, it's like who's thinking about Glastonbury in October, November when those gone. It sounds like a weird question to ask, and we've just spoken about how the Ali Pali and the World Darts are sort of intrinsically linked, kind of joined at the hip now, right? But given that demand and I guess the number of tickets that you could potentially sell, would you ever consider kind of a bigger venue, do you think?
It's difficult. It's a question that's asked a lot because it's an obvious question to ask. But I think for the reasons that I said before about Ali Pali being so iconic and so associated with the event now, it would be a real wrench to leave there. And there's no doubt, as a venue, look, it's an old venue and it is limited in certain areas. You know, there would be other venues where facilities would be better in certain areas, but we can compensate for that. And Ali Pali are a fantastic partner. They work very hard with us. The event's great for them. You know, we would hate to leave Ali Pali in the same way that, you know, our sister company World Snooker would hate to leave the Crucible for their World Championship. And, you know, I'm sure that the FA would hate to hold the FA Cup final anywhere other than Wembley. You know, I know they did the Millennium Stadium, but you get my point. Certain things just fit in certain venues. And I think for us now, it's about saying, right, we've got to make this event as good as it can be. And one of the ways we do that is by making sure that 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon feels like 10:00 on a Saturday night. And the atmosphere is exactly the same whenever you come. And you wouldn't want to be in a venue where you had that 10:00 on a Saturday night feel, but on the Tuesday afternoon it was quiet and subdued because you had 10,000 seats and you'd only sold 4,000 tickets. Now, we don't know, you know, now we might be able to sell 10,000 tickets for every venue, but we're not greedy either. We want to make sure that we give the best fan experience and the best visual experience for our broadcasters and our partners. So at the moment, leaving Ali Pali is a long, long way from our thoughts.
Yeah, very fair. And let's talk about 2024 now, the tournament that happened a couple of months ago, because it was kind of funny in a way, right? In that, you know, you had a lot of top players going out early, really. You had Peter Wright lost his first match, Gerwyn Price got knocked out in the third round, Michael Smith in the fourth, Van Gerwen in the quarterfinals to an unseeded player. But none of that mattered because you had a 16-year-old who was on an unbelievable run to the final. Not just the calibre of player that he was beating, but the way he was doing it as well. You know, he was winning really comfortably, doing it in style with huge averages. We've spoken about how darts is always kind of in the news around that time anyway, but he sort of took it from being a sports relevant story to a front page story, right? It became a kind of story of national interest. What was that kind of like being like on the inside?
Well, it was interesting because we knew he was a good talent beforehand because he'd become Youth World Champion a month before at the end of November. And we knew he was going to be a prospect, and it was could he win a couple of matches? But it wasn't just the fact he was winning, or as you referenced, the way he was winning. It was his whole demeanour throughout it. He was calm, he was composed, he was confident, he wasn't flustered by anything. And it snowballed, and it just started to gather a real life of its own. And it was like, oh, do you think he'll make the quarterfinals? Well, we never know. And then he made the quarterfinals, and then it's like, do you think he can win it? Well, I surely can't win it. You know, can he win it? And it was remarkable, and full credit to him, because I think what helps is that people like those kind of stories. You know, if you look at Emma Raducanu winning the US Open, if you look at when Wayne Rooney broke through, and other footballers have come through at a young age, people like that sort of thing. It's a story that the media can cotton on to. And Luke was right in that mould, you know, and obviously with the World Championship being front and centre of the sports media at that time of year anyway, it was perfect timing for his story to grow. And again, it was a bit of fortune, but in the same way, what I have been saying to people was we've been investing in youth darts for over 10 years now. So it's not a surprise to us that someone has come through who is that capable. You know, and there are others as well. There's a conveyor belt. Luke is an exceptional talent, probably a generational talent, but there are plenty of other players of his demographic, like older teenagers, who are almost ready to become pros, you know, and it's changing. You know, when I started in the sport, it was the average age of players was mid-40s onwards. You're going to struggle to sustain what you need to sustain as a professional dart player now with the intensity of the schedule, the amount of travel, the media interest, etc., etc. It's going to be a young person's game. And I say persons because our events are all mixed gender as well, you know. The Luke Littler story was fantastic, and it's something that's taken darts to a new audience. The final was the most watched non-football event in the history of Sky Sports, which is just remarkable when you consider there's the Ashes, the Cricket World Cup, the Ryder Cup, the Masters, you know. And it wasn't a little bit above those ratings. It was a million above those ratings. And that just shows you really what a product it is and how easy it is for people from any walk of life to like darts.
I just want to ask a little bit about, was it sort of a bit of a learning experience both for you guys and for Luke, I guess? You mentioned sort of Raducanu and people like Rooney there. I guess this has kind of felt like the first time in darts that you've had a truly overnight star. I guess maybe Fallon Sherrock, for example, really took to the sport by storm in 2019 with her performances. But it did feel like the first time you had someone sort of come out of nowhere in Luke. And I guess for him, there were certain things that he learned as the tournament went on, and probably for you guys as well, just in terms of perhaps having to protect him a little bit because of how young he is.
100%. I mean, we have a safeguarding policy that we've had in place for a number of years. and to be honest, not really had to use.
Yeah.
You know, we have a development tour, which is 16 to 23-year-olds, and it's in play there for obvious reasons. But in terms of the adult game, it's not been anything like that. You know, we've had players come through out of nowhere and reach semis and reach finals, but they're just, you know, flash in the pan type things, and they don't capture the public's imagination in the same way that obviously Luke, who was then 16, in the same way that he did. So we became very conscious very early of the need to protect him. We ended up giving him full-time security. Fortunately, he's got very sensible parents. He's got a very sensible manager. The people around him are solid, and the fact that he's sensible as well definitely helps. So the decisions that were being made collaboratively with Luke's involvement, Luke's blessing, and they were being made for his benefit, because ultimately, whether he won that world championship or not kind of doesn't really matter in the context of what he's got ahead of him. He's got, you know, probably a 30-year career ahead of him where he could earn a lot of money, become a very famous and wealthy person. And it's important that he's guided through that journey in the best possible way to maximize his career. So we had to step up very quickly to make sure that we were playing our part in that. And there's certain things that he's been asked to do that we've said no to, certain brands that have tried to associate with him that we've said no to. And it's all the decisions that are being made now, you know, between Luke, his parents, his manager, and ourselves, you know, are being done through different eyes than there would have been, you know, 2 months ago. So yeah, it's been a fast learning curve, but a good one.
Yeah. Had you ever seen that kind of furore around a darts player before? We had like Phil Taylor, obviously, and Raymond van Barneveld have kind of been two of the biggest stars.
Yeah,
of the sport.
Phil, Barney, Michael van Gerwen, etc. They get the headlines in the sports world. Fallon Sherrock did get headlines from a different type of media, you know, women's angle media, lifestyle media, a lot of overseas media, but it was over a shorter period of time. She was very unlucky, Fallon, because just after she did what she did, COVID came.
Yeah.
So her kind of year as a dart superstar was really curtailed very quickly. So she was very unlucky. Whereas Luke's now got the rest of this year to go on and be this teenage sensation. But no, he's transcended anything we've had before. And I think it's, you know, to be fair, darts is in a bigger place now than it was back then. But regardless of that, he has elevated it to a different level.
I mentioned before about how he'd made the darts a front page story, really, and I think there was even one MP who was clamouring for the finals to be shown on free to air, which is classic, right? Political point scoring when the darts is in the news. But was that ever a consideration for you guys? I mean, obviously Sky have been invested in it for so long, and they should be rewarded when there's that moment. Right?
Sky have been a long-standing partner of the PDC since day one in the early 90s, and their coverage of darts is absolutely second to none and always has been. They deserve to be rewarded with the viewing figures for the investment and the expertise that they've brought to darts production. We got best part of 5 million viewers. If we'd have been on a free-to-air channel, that would have been a lot higher. But in the modern day and age, people want access to a pay TV channel. It's doable. Now TV and, you know, that kind of thing. I think you're right, the way you say it. Sky deserves to be rewarded for what they'd put into darts with that rating. But obviously, had we been on free-to-air, it would have been sensational. But again, it's bigger picture. You know, Sky showing 60, 70 days of darts a year. So it's all very well a free-to-air broadcaster saying, well, yeah, can we show the World Championship final? Okay, that's fine. Do you want to show day one of the World Grand Prix as well?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
You can't have your cake and eat it.
Yeah, and I think also I saw a lot more darts in my timeline during that tournament. I've seen a lot more darts in my timeline since the tournament as well. And you mentioned, you had the close to 5 million people tuning in with that final, all those additional people on social media as well. That's potentially a lot of new people for you guys to engage with. How are you kind of, trying to bottle up what happened from that tournament?
Well, it's a different demographic as well. It's a younger demographic, and a demographic that consume their media via different platforms. So we're doing our best to deliver content in that way. We've upped our game on TikTok, and, our database is growing hugely, and we're tailoring our messaging more appropriately to people based on who they are. It's important to know your audience, and we've always felt that we've known our audience, and now we've maybe got an audience who we don't know as well. So we need to learn quickly who they are and make sure we're delivering content that's relevant to them, and promotional material and marketing messaging that's relevant to them. And you're always going to get a tail off. You're going to get people who were just interested because it was Christmas and because he was 16 and whatever. But our job is to harness those people and to make sure that they understand the excitement of darts, the social aspect of darts, and the accessibility of darts, and try and keep them engaged with us throughout the year. We always say we're not like a football club where we're trying to sell you a season ticket to come every week. We understand most people will just come to darts once, maybe twice a year, and we're fine with that, because the way our tour works, we take the events around not only the country but Europe and the rest of the world. So we'll come to you, but we want you to commit to us when we come to you, and then follow us across our platforms and in the other ways in which you engage with darts yourself throughout the rest of the year, which is a different commitment to saying to people, right, are you going to come every week? We're not in that space.
Yeah. Have you noticed some of the engagement from the World Championships kind of carry through in the early stages of the Premier League season?
I mean, Luke Littler hit a 9-darter in the Bahrain Masters a couple of weeks after the World Championship, and that did like 11 million on Twitter, X, whatever, within a couple of days. And we obviously pumped it out across every platform we had, and media were lifting it, and the clickbait stuff is just relentless now. I mean, it hit up my timeline. Honestly, I read some of the headlines. I think I have to say the standard of journalism in some fields is so low. So regardless
not
of what
sports
they're writing,
pro, obviously, not in sports
no, not
pro,
a sports pro. No, you guys have got a high benchmark, but some of the stuff you think, Christ, is this whether it's a story or not, just write it properly. You know?
That's what happens when you hit the mainstream.
But that's the thing. That's a nice problem to have. I'd far rather have that problem than be going into our media office and saying, lads, no one's talking about us. What's going on? So sure. It's a nice problem to have, and one that we're learning to come to terms with now.
Sorry to interrupt your podcast, but if you haven't heard, we are heading to Manhattan for Sports Pro New York. On the 18th and 19th of March, you can hear from industry innovators such as LPGA Tour Commissioner Molly Marcoux-Samaan, David Gandler, the CEO of Fubo TV, and Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark. Come to be inspired and learn how to successfully navigate the major opportunities in modern sports media. Book your place today at newyork.sportspro.com, and listeners to this podcast can get 20% off by using code PODCAST at checkout. Terms and conditions apply, and this offer is not applicable to pre-existing purchases.
It's interesting as well how you mentioned before about that new audience and maybe a different kind of audience as well, because I feel like darts has obviously been really successful at, I guess, cornering a very specific audience and appealing to a very specific part of the market. I mean, a lot of my friends describe the reason they like going to the World Championships is because it feels like being an away end at football but without the animosity. Okay. It's a night where they can enjoy themselves, they get to do a lot of chanting. But I guess part of that is also because, it is it's a boozy night for a lot of people. And I guess thinking about how you bring in some of those younger audiences and maybe also female audiences as well, who some of those sorts of things might not appeal as much to. How much do you kind of think about how you sort of bring those people and make those events?
When you look at the live events, one thing you'd notice if you've ever been to one of our events is on the ticket it says no football colours. Yeah. So you're not allowed into a PDC event with any form of football shirt on. If you write a football message on your 180 card, there's a strong chance the security will take it from you. As I said at the start, I've worked in football for the best part of 20 years, and the country loves football and the world loves football, and that's fine. But football brings tribalism, can bring aggression, can bring tension, and all these things, they don't work in the darts atmosphere, because generally at the darts, one of the beauties of the event is that people don't tend to mind who wins. And that's really good, because it means you don't leave disappointed. Like, a lot of people go to football and their primary aim of going to football is to moan, criticise people, have a bad time, and then leave and be quite happy that they've let off all their steam and frustration and they've had a bad week as they've taken it out on footballers and referees and whatever. Well, we don't want that at the darts. We want people to come and enjoy themselves. So we change the whole dynamic of it. And the fancy dress helps. The fact that you're there on a social, as you say, helps. The fact that there's no animosity between rival tables because they don't know that one's City and one's United or whatever. That all helps generate that fun element that it delivers. And I think when you talk about younger fans, we have dedicated family areas at the events, and a lot of kids enjoy following darts, not just because of Luke Littler, but because there's a lot of kids who play darts. We've got a Key Stage 2 initiative that we've rolled out across schools called Bullseye Maths, helping kids with multiplication, subtraction, division. There's a lot of ways in which kids can engage with darts themselves. They like the colours, they like the walk-ons, so that's important for us to bear that in mind as well. And, with the female audience, we're like 65-35 male to female ratio, which for a sport is pretty strong. Women know that they can come to darts and it's not a threatening environment. It's a welcoming environment. A lot of women will play darts themselves. So it does work on that level as well.
With that new audience coming in as well, I guess another thing that it might do is kind of, change your proposition to sponsors a little bit more, right? Because you're able to show to them with, the audience is diversifying a little bit. Is that something you've sort of started to notice already on the back of the Worlds? I know you mentioned there's been some trying to work with Luke himself. Or
traditionally, a lot of our sponsors have been bookmakers. Well, Luke Littler's no good to you if you're a bookmaker.
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. That's the thing, right? Because if a sponsor of the PDC wants to take advantage of Littler and use him in their material, they can't at the moment, right?
So, he's too young to bet, and he's too young to be associated with a betting brand. So, you have to tread very carefully in a world of increasing regulation there. But that doesn't mean that other brands don't want to be involved as well, and we're talking constantly to brands now from different sectors that we've had before. And sponsorship's a changing world as well. It's obviously not just about branding now, data and engagement, lots of different factors come into what makes a good partnership. It's been helpful in opening new doors. I wouldn't say we've seen a dramatic upturn in demand for sponsorship because of Luke Littler, but I would say we've seen a dramatic uptake in demand for sponsorship because of the way darts has gone generally.
That would have been quite a unique challenge with your title sponsor, Paddy Power, who you mentioned during the Worlds. How did you kind of work with them to, make sure that even though this guy was the story, and how they were still sort of maximising?
Well, Paddy's were very good with it because they can report on Luke, but they couldn't use Luke in any of their promotional messaging or anything like that. And they had to be careful that any imagery involving Luke, wasn't branded unless it was completely necessary, i.e. on the backdrop of the set or anything like that. If you notice, I did the trophy presentation. I would normally do that with somebody from the sponsors. They couldn't have anybody, with that, shaking hands with him on stage. It's a difficult world. That bookmakers have been fined heavily for content that's deemed to be aimed at under 18s. I think it might even be under 25s, in a lot of cases. So they have to tread a careful line. And also, they do things properly. They don't want to take risks. They don't want to put their messaging out to young people. So it was something that, again, we learned on the job. We were meeting with Paddies on a regular basis. They were briefing us. Their lawyers were involved. And everybody, by communicating clearly and by preempting what was going to happen, we were able to work through it. But it's a similar situation we've got now with BetMGM on the Premier League darts. Luke's wearing a charity partnership logo for motor neurone disease, which BetMGM said to him, look, we can't brand you, so you can put a charity that's close to your heart, and he chose that one. So there's positive ways of them working with him without being associated with him.
But let's talk a little bit about where darts goes from here then, I suppose. We spoke a little bit at the start of the show about where it's particularly strong at the moment. Obviously here in the UK, sell out all of the events in the dark region as well, and also I imagine in places like Australia also. Where are you guys really sort of focused at the moment in trying to grow the game?
So at the moment, the two main areas that we're looking to move into where we either barely operate or don't operate at all are Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. So Eastern Europe, over the last couple of years, we've had European Tour events in the Czech Republic and Hungary, which have been really well received, and a World Series event in Poland, equally well received. Southeast Asia, there are tens of thousands of players across Japan, Philippines, Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. But it goes back to, again, they're amateur players, they're social players, they play in local competitions. The standard's really good, though, and we want to try and harness that and give them opportunities to become international players. So it's difficult for us. We haven't got particularly strong broadcast coverage in that part of the world because of the time zone generally doesn't help. But that's something we're working on. So, the conversations I'm having at the moment are about events in Southeast Asia. I've got 3 ongoing conversations there. And Eastern Europe, we've moved to a bigger arena in Poland. We sold 12,000 tickets. We'll have huge crowds in there for our World Series event in June. It's about identifying the regions where we know darts is played a lot as an amateur sport and how we can bring that on. America's an obvious one as well. But it's such a huge nut to crack, and also it's dangerous just to treat America as one entity, because the northeast coast of America is really, really strong for darts, and yet there's other parts of America where there's almost none. So, we need to kind of break that down into specific target areas, but it's all on the list, and there's only so many days in the week.
Yeah. And the calendar already is pretty.
The calendar's rammed. I think we've got one spare week this year, which is the first week of July. And I think the players wouldn't mind a little break.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does the Middle East ever come onto your radar at all? Because, obviously, Saudi Arabia is somewhere that Matchroom kind of has a bit of a relationship with already, in boxing and snooker.
Boxing, snooker in Saudi. And we do our event in Bahrain, which is really well received. We've done an event in Dubai, both World Series events. The World Series is our concept that introduces darts to new markets. In the Middle East, you tend to appeal to the expat communities. a little bit more than the local communities, although there were Bahrainis at our event in January there. So, yeah, the Middle East is one that it's a more limited market for us.
Yeah, sure. And just in terms of getting, I guess, finding those next Luke Littlers and things like that, you mentioned that from what you're saying, there's a bit of a conveyor belt coming through, but you find kind of finding the way that players are taking up the sport is changing a little bit. I guess traditionally it might have been you were down your local pub or something and there was a board, but you mentioned earlier like Flight Club, right? There's probably a lot more cases where there's a dartboard on the back of the bedroom door.
There is. I mean, Luke Littler's never he didn't learn to play in a pub. He learns to play at home in his nappy, if you've seen the video, But no, it's different now. You go and buy a dartboard from Argos, you stick it on the back of your bedroom door and you stand there all day practicing. And also data's so important now. I think there was it always used to be these jokes in the darts community. People would say, "Oh, I lost, but I averaged 90," and then someone else would say he didn't average 90, he was hopeless. Whereas now, because of apps like Dart Connect, everybody's scoring their own games. So you know how good you are. If you are a young player with some talent, you don't really even need to necessarily be playing. Obviously, you need to play competitively at some point, but you can just practice yourself and just get your own average up, just get your own finishing up. You'll reach a level where you think, actually, I'm good enough now. And then you've got to translate that to the pressure of playing in a real event. But it's not like some sports where you have to go out and learn at an academy or on course or somewhere like that. It is that accessible that for 50 quid or even maybe a little bit more, you could be playing in your bedroom and train yourself. That's the other thing. There's no coaching. There's no right or wrong. You hit or you miss. That's it. And it's like you need to minimize the amount of movement you have, but nevertheless, it's up to you. If you can throw it in some obscure way and it goes in, then good luck to you. You can be self-taught and you can get yourself to a level where you're then capable enough to go and start playing in local tournaments. And you can do that all off your own back.
And do you think that's sort of going to start to change the perception of darts? I mean, I think the perception of darts has changed already, but from the time when people just sort of described it as a pub game and whatever. But that will kind of help, right? In the sense that you have these younger players coming through who have trained themselves in that way, and there is that wider appreciation of the technical side to it and that kind of thing.
If you look at a lot of our elite players now, you look at people like Luke Humphries, Nathan Aspinall, Gerwyn Price, they don't look like they've walked out of pubs. The image has changed completely, and it's never going to be completely changed overnight, but it is changing at a good pace. And players know now if they want to compete at the highest level, they've got to be able to look after themselves. They've got to be able to manage their schedules, manage their travel, manage their diet, manage their commitments, and make sure they give themselves enough downtime, enough practice, enough rest, etc. So the old image of darts isn't going to succeed anymore. It kind of makes me cringe a little bit because when people mention, if I sit down with someone to have a conversation about darts and they make a sort of snidey comment or a jokey comment about like the old pub game version, I think, do you know what? You're 20 years out of date. Yeah. Have you really not seen anything to do with it at all? I'm fine if somebody sits down and says, "Oh, I can see how it's changing or how it's changed." That's fine. But when people still think, if they go talk about the Smith and Jones sketch or talk about Jockey versus Eric or whatever, that has its place in darts history and the traditions of the game, but it's not the modern game.
We obviously spoke at the top of the show about the amount of time that you've been in the role and some of the biggest changes you've seen in the last sort of 15 years. What do you think is going to be the sort of big change in darts over the 15 years to come? What have you sort of identified as the things that are going to influence the sport?
I think the main things I'm thinking about are how we can truly build a global darts community. If you look at a Peloton or a Strava or something like that, how can we build a darts version of that and bring everybody together regardless of where they are, how good they are, and just bring their engagement with darts and with the PDC into one place. And then also make sure that the tour and the participants on the tour become genuinely global. At the moment, we've got a New Zealander on the tour, we've got Aussies on the tour, we've got a Filipino on the tour. They've had to leave their lives behind and relocate to the UK. Now I get golfers, tennis players, Formula One drivers, other individual sports people, they have to leave their hometowns and move. But ultimately, at the moment, unless you go and live in the UK or maybe the Netherlands if you're lucky, it's difficult to commit to the tour full time. And that isn't necessarily where the sport needs to be if it's going to become a truly global professional sport. So the aim is to keep breaking new markets in and expanding our footprint in terms of broadcast and database and everything like that, and just making sure that we are a genuine option for dart players wherever they are in the world. And that's at not just the top level, but all the way down our pyramid. You know, we have a challenge tour, we have a development tour, we have a women's series, we have affiliate tours in all these different territories for the best local players in those regions. But it's got to be a genuine pyramid, not this is how far I can go because I have to relocate 5,000 miles if I want to be if I want to be a pro. But that's a long road to walk down.
Mm-hmm. And how about you? Can you see yourself being in this for another 15
years?
Yeah?
I don't know. I'm 44 now, so that would take me to 59? Yeah, we'll see. I've got a few years left in me yet.
Yeah, well, I won't hold you to it anyway. But yeah, Matt, in all seriousness, really enjoyed that conversation. It's been great hearing about the PDC, the business of darts, and all there is to come for the sport, really. So really appreciate you coming down.
Thanks very much. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.